So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this session on mental health awareness for seniors. Just going to start off by sharing my screen. Okay, I don't want me seeing this.
Back to the.
Okay. Yeah, if you don't mind muting yourself, I can hear voices. Yeah. Welcome to today's presentation. This presentation is as part of the Senior Support and Empowerment Program run by the GIM Legal Learning Centre. And today, and for the next 2 weeks, I am going to be talking about seniors and mental health awareness. We're going to run a couple of sessions, not just on this topic, but also on financial empowerment for seniors, financial fraud and scam awareness. And we've already had a couple of sessions on those. We're also going to run a workshop on elder abuse for seniors, as well as digital literacy for seniors. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about seniors and mental health awareness, and it's going to be divided in 3 sessions. So I'm going to be talking about mental health and aging and ways in which this can be combated. So the next couple of slides will be talking about, all the things that are associated with mental health and aging, as well as ways to improve that. So today I'm going to be presenting part 1 of this of these sessions, which would be on understanding mental health awareness in aging. Part 2 next week will be on promoting mental wellness, and part 3 will be on how to seek help and support others. I would like this to be an interactive session. So if anyone has any questions, all they need to do is to indicate by raising their hands. And I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. So today is part 1 of mental health awareness in seniors. And I'm going to be talking about understanding mental health in aging. My name is Isobel, so I'm your presenter for the next 3 weeks. So understanding mental health in aging, why is that important? So first and foremost, a huge fact is that seniors are living longer, but mental health is often overlooked. And why is that? Mental health is often overlooked because the society tends to focus on mental health issues in younger people, because younger people are for majority of the workforce. And in some cultures, mental health issues are actually stigmatized. So there's a lot of hush-hush surrounding that. A lot of people do not want to talk about mental health. A lot of people hide away their mental health issues. So that's why it's often overlooked. And seniors are living longer. And studies have shown that there are a number of mental health issues that materialize as we get older. So here are some statistics. These are the population estimates by age and gender as of July 1, 2024 in Canada. And this data is from Statistics Canada. And as you can see from where I've highlighted, approximately 20% of Canadians are over the age of 65. And there is even a huger percentage between the ages of 55 to and above, which are considered as seniors in Canada. Also, the sum of persons aged between 15 and 64 compared to the population aged 65 and older, as you can see from this plot, is actually decreasing. it's actually decreasing. So in 1971, there were about 7.8 persons aged between 15 to 64 compared to the population age 65 and older. So what does that mean? It means that there were more younger people in comparison to older people, but that is slowly getting less, as you can see, between the 80s and the 2020s. In 2024, Statistics Canada found that there are about 3.5 persons aged 15 to 64 compared to the population aged 65 and older. So that tells us that, the number of people getting older, the ratio between the number of people getting older and the number of younger people is actually getting smaller. So that shows us that, people are living longer. And as a result of that, the roles of seniors are evolving. So seniors are staying longer in the workforce. Some people are staying longer in the workforce beyond the age of 65 as a result of financial necessity. Some people don't want to retire early. They're passionate about their jobs, or even if they retire, they go into business. They do something that they're interested in, and there's a trend now for the late retirement in both men and women. And also, some workforces are actually retaining older people because of their experience, because of their mentorship and their economic contribution. So seniors are staying longer in the workforce. And if they're staying longer in the workforce, it's important that they're healthy, both physically and mentally. But there are challenges associated with this. So there's ageism, and there's also some seniors actually struggle adapting to new technologies. There's ageism in that there are some jobs that people who are younger, between the ages of 15 to 64, are preferred over older people. And also that can actually trigger mental health issues. And also some older people are actually struggling with adapting to new technologies like AI, for instance. Another factor is seniors are involved in grandparenting roles. A lot of us have benefited from having our grandparents looking after our children. They form a support system in terms of not just childcare, but emotional support, even for adult children. And also, seniors are actually quite valuable in transmitting cultures between generations. If you meet somebody who was raised by their grandparents, they tend to have better values than an individual that didn't have the privilege of being raised by their grandparents. And also having seniors living longer and staying with their families creates intergenerational bonds. It strengthens family ties. And again, there are challenges with this. So these could impose physical demands on the family, especially if the senior is not healthy, and it can also pose a financial strain. And just based on the last thing I mentioned regarding challenges of having elderly parents, elderly seniors in your family, it's not just on the family level, but also on the societal level, on the country or population level. As seniors are getting older and living longer, there is a burden on the health system if they're not healthy. There's increased demand for long-term care, especially when seniors suffer from chronic conditions such as heart disease, arthritis, and cancer. And also, that leads to pressure on the healthcare workforce. Staff, if we remember during the time of COVID, there were a lot of staff shortages, even up to today, especially during the winter months. And healthcare workers are found to suffer from burnout because the hospitals are bursting at the seams when elderly people are not healthy, and there's a huge number of admissions at emergency care and even at primary care, for instance. And these have cost implications. So they're rising healthcare expenditure. So from now, I'm sure you're getting the picture that it is important for seniors to look after their health, to be healthy, both physically and mentally. And there's an overarching economic impact regarding seniors or people living longer. So when it comes to pensions and social services, there are sustainability concerns, because as more people retire and live longer, the government now, they have to face rising costs to fund these pensions and other social security programs. And also there's consumer power as well. Seniors, they're a growing market segment. There's this thing being talked about, like the silver economy, where there are opportunities for products to be developed to cater for older people. And also there are policy implications in that the government has to make up policies to support aging workers, to ensure that the pensions provided are sustainable, that they were able to pay everybody. If people are living longer, even beyond 100, they have to be sustainable pensions that could be paid out to them as long as they live. And also there has to be investment in age-friendly infrastructure as well. So what we can gather is that seniors are vital contributors to society. Something else I didn't mention was volunteering as well. Seniors, they volunteer in various sectors. During the last election, there were a lot of seniors that contributed to the polling exercise. And also they volunteer in childcare, they volunteer in the communities as well. So they are vital contributors to society, but they also face systemic challenges. And this includes the need for balanced policies that support aging with dignity. So there's a need for that. Seniors have to be supported to age with dignity. And part of this is promoting mental health awareness in older people. So why is mental health awareness in seniors important? And this slide is just showing data from the WHO. And these are some of the key facts. So one of the things that have been found through statistics is that by 2030, 1 in 6 people in the world would be aged 60 years or over. And loneliness and social isolation are key factors for mental health conditions in later life. Also, 1 in 6 older adults experience abuse, often by their own carers, and approximately 14% of adults aged 60 or over live with a mental disorder. And mental disorders among older adults account for 10.6% of the total years lived with disability for this age group. So what does this mean? So some older people tend to have disability issues, and out of these 10.6% of these tend to be associated with mental health disorders. So when I was preparing this presentation, there were a lot of things that jumped out to me. Like some of us might not be age 60 or over, but we're getting there. And there are things that we need to do to support our mental health. There are steps that we need to start taking now in terms of making plans for, what are we going to do when we retire? How are we going to keep active? Have we got a plan, of how we are going to fulfill our goals? Even people who are in their 30s are in their 40s, because I didn't show these the stats here, but there are high statistics for people that actually develop mental health issues because they feel dissatisfied with their achievements. So this mental health awareness issue is not just has implications for seniors, but it also has implications for in the emerging adult population. So coming back to Canada, with respect to key statistics, this slide provides some of these details. So as many as 1 in 3 older adults living on their own say they have a need for mental health. And 12% of those 65 and older have reported feeling socially isolated. And there are delays in diagnosis, which increase as people age. So it's been shown that sometimes that, older people, they're not given priority. When you get to a certain age, you're left at the bottom of the waiting list, say in the NHS or the Canadian medical health system. And then 22% of older adults in one study were screened positive for depression, and 5% of older adults access health services for mood or anxiety disorders. There are a lot of doctors' visits where older adults are actually requesting medications for, depression and anxiety. So this indeed is a developing problem. So what are some common mental health challenges? So I've listed some of them here, and I'm going to talk about them in more detail in the next couple of slides. So a common mental health challenge is depression. So depression is basically a mood disorder that's marked by persistent sadness, loss of interest, impaired daily functioning. And there's anxiety as well, which is characterized by excessive worry, fear, nervousness that can interfere with daily life. And there's also dementia, which is a decline in cognitive function, which affects memory, thinking, and social activities and abilities, and it's often progressive. And there's loneliness as well, and substance use. All these are mental health challenges that manifest in older individuals. So coming to depression. So depression in the elderly has various characteristics, including negative thoughts, feeling like crushing sadness and fatigue. And also it can be associated with eating disorders such as anorexia. An elderly person who is depressed, one of the characteristics is that they tend to abandon, the things they love. This is somebody who probably liked going out, liked being active, going for walks, going on holiday, but they become more and more withdrawn. And they tend to have difficulty sleeping. Some of them begin to self-medicate by using alcohol and even drugs. And another sign of depression is weight loss and also isolation. They tend to keep away. If they had like a friend group, they just, lose interest in associating with anybody. So depression in older adults is actually termed late life depression, and it could be triggered by a number of health problems, such as living with a chronic illness, such as heart condition, stroke, or chronic pain. Late life depression can also be associated with life changes, such as experiencing the loss of a spouse, leaving a home that you've been living in for so many years and decades, or even retirement. Late life depression can also be associated with social factors such as lacking social support from friends or family when people feel isolated, especially if they've been moved into a retirement home, or if they have to give up their independence. And it could also be associated with other conditions. People who have a history of depression tend to fall they're usually susceptible to late life depression. And an increased use of alcohol is also associated with late life depression. At this point, I want to ask if anybody has any questions. You can raise your hand if you have any questions. If not, feel free to use the chat to document your questions. So what about anxiety? Anxiety is characterized by excessive worry, fear, and physical symptoms, which could, which could be heart palpitations or shortness of breath. So the symptoms of and even digestive issues. Digestive issues is actually a very common indicator of anxiety. And people who suffer from anxiety, they tend to avoid social situations or activities. They tend to check or recheck, for excessively for safety. When they're going out there, they're not comfortable. They're worried that they didn't lock their property. They're worried that they left the cooker on. They're worried that they left the lights on. They're worried, like if they see somebody walking down the street towards them or even behind them, they suffer from panic attacks. They also suffer from changes in appetite, sleep patterns, or even their weight. And they also suffer, it's characterized by social withdrawal and isolation. And one thing you probably noticed by now is that there's an overlap between anxiety, the characteristics of anxiety and depression. So what advice is usually given to people who suspect that their loved one might be suffering from any of these mental problems is actually to seek the advice of a medical profession. So avoiding social situations or activities is actually very common. I actually have a family member who suffers from anxiety, and they find it very uncomfortable going to places where there are large crowds. They do not like associating. They don't like going to any social activities. They just prefer to be in a familiar environment, in the safety of their home. Even within their home, they just want to stay in a closed environment, like their bedroom. And it's it might not sound as serious as cancer, for instance, or heart disease or stroke, but it's actually quite debilitating because it affects their relationship, not just their relationship with the wider community, but their families, because people that suffer from these kind of conditions, they tend to avoid everybody, not just strangers, not just their neighbors, but they even sometimes they don't want to see their loved ones. They don't want to see their grandchildren. They don't want to see their siblings or their friends. So it is a very social issue that needs to be addressed. So what are common anxiety triggers? This slide is a bit wordy, so I'm just going to walk you through it. So chronic illnesses such as diabetes, heart disease, and chronic pain, especially chronic pain, which has been shown to be a stressor, a very big stressor, a very big trigger of anxiety. All these, including chronic pain, can actually increase anxiety levels. Also, social and emotional factors such as isolation and loneliness. So, as I mentioned when I was talking about the previous slide, people that suffer from anxiety demonstrate reduced social contact and the loss of close friends or family members. So this happens a lot because the more the person isolates themselves, people feel, and especially if they don't understand what the person is going through, they feel, oh, this person doesn't want to socialize. This person doesn't want to talk to us. This person is alienating us. They keep away from the person, instead of taking the steps to understand. And sometimes they don't even know what the person is going through. So this can lead to the loss of close friends or family members, and it can increase feelings of loneliness and isolation, which can actually aggravate the anxiety symptoms. Also, grief and loss are huge anxiety triggers. So it could be the death of a spouse, it could be the death of family member, death of friends. I remember before my dad passed away, you know, when he began to lose a lot of his friends, you know, he was very sad about it, you know, and I witnessed how anxious he used to feel. You know, he used to say to me, you know, I'm sure my time is getting very close. And I'm sure I'm going to die in a matter of years or in a matter of months. So grief and loss, you know, especially of loved ones, friends, family around you can actually trigger anxiety. Also, loss of independence is an anxiety trigger. You know, feeling that you're losing control over one's life can be very stressful. Imagine you get to a certain age, you know, before you've been a very active person, you've been a very independent person, you've been someone that held down a business, worked from 9 to 5, very productive, and then all of a sudden, you know, you have a stroke, or you know, you're losing your memory, and then you lose your independence as well. And you know, something else that manifests is anxiety. Other life transitions, such as retirement, can actually trigger anxiety and stress. You know, the fact that you're losing that communication, that camaraderie that comes with going to work every day, talking to people. You know, when you see people sitting down in the mall, you know, just sitting and people watching, you know, there's a reason for that. It's they're probably retired people, but you know, they want to feel human contact. They want to watch what other people are doing, because that's a way in which they are trying to deal with their stress and their anxiety. They want to see people you know, going about their life. It's actually a source of comfort to them. If they're unable to do that, it is actually an anxiety trigger. Also, moving from your place of familiarity, your place of comfort, you know, can actually trigger anxiety. When somebody is uprooted from a home that they've lived in for decades to move into a long-term care facility, that can actually trigger anxiety. It can be very overwhelming for the individual. Also, the use of medications and substances as well. So the side effects of many common medications for seniors, especially steroids and some heart and respiratory drugs can cause anxiety. So one of the things that is important to note as a senior is when you're prescribed a medication, it's best to ask your doctor, does it trigger anxiety? You know, are there alternatives that you can be prescribed, you know, to avoid um, to avoid suffering from anxiety attacks. Also, alcohol and caffeine can actually can worsen anxiety symptoms in older adults. Some of us are big coffee drinkers, and we know the effects, you know, the jittery effects that we suffer when we drink, you know, when we go overboard with our coffee. You know, that's actually more pronounced in older adults. Financial and cognitive issues can actually trigger anxiety attacks, especially with respect to financial insecurity. You know, you get to that age, your pension is not enough, you're worried how you're going to survive, you're worried about losing your property, you're worried about paying your bills, affording medications. There are a lot of elderly people that do not have health insurance, cannot afford health insurance, and this actually triggers anxiety as well. They are worried about making ends meet. You know, they're worried about even looking after their grandchildren. There are elderly people that have lost children and have the responsibility of looking after grandchildren as well. These can also be triggers of anxiety. Also, cognitive decline is a trigger of anxiety. You know, when people are beginning to have poor memory, you know, they go out, they can't remember where they are, you know, they recognize that, you know, their memory is failing, that can actually contribute to heightened anxiety. Another anxiety trigger are health and mobility issues, the loss of physical function, especially if you're suffering from any kind of debilitating condition, such as arthritis or any neurodegenerative disease that can actually affect your physical mobility. So declining mobility and physical limitations can actually lead to feelings of helplessness and fear. Anxiety can actually spike when one's daily needs go unmet. So from this cartoon here, you can see these are statistics from this article on seniors anxiety associated with daily needs. And it says that about 1 in 5 older adults who need assistance with daily activities have been shown to report anxiety symptoms. And this actually represents more than 3 million people. So when their needs are not met, the findings showed that, 36% of people who are unable to carry out regular household activities such as their laundry, shopping, banking even, suffer from anxiety attacks. Even getting out of bed, walking, going outside, and other mobility tasks contributed to anxiety attacks in about 39% of older people. And then personal care, not being able to, feed yourself, personal hygiene, dress yourself, also contributed to about anxiety attacks in about 44% of individuals. So as you can see, health and mobility issues, not being able to do all those things that you took for granted when you were much, much younger, contribute to anxiety issues. And this is an indication that, preparing ourselves, preparing seniors by educating them on mental health awareness is actually very important so that they're able to deal with these issues when they arise. So what about dementia? So for starters, dementia, a lot of people confuse dementia with Alzheimer's, but dementia is actually the umbrella term for loss of memory and other thinking abilities that are severe enough to interfere with the daily life of an individual. On the other hand, there are different types of dementia, such as Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, Lewy body accumulation. So Lewy bodies, in layman's terms, they're just proteins that actually accumulate in the brain, and they actually trigger cognitive dysfunction. Also, frontotemporal Alzheimer's is another type of dementia, and there are other types of dementia such as Huntington's disease and mixed dementia, which could be a mixture of any of these. So what are the signs of dementia? And they include a lot of issues associated with short-term memory. So you can imagine things that, you read something, all of a sudden you've forgotten what you read. You go outside, or you want to do something, then, or you come to the kitchen from your bedroom to probably prepare a meal for yourself, and you get to the kitchen and you're wondering why you're there. So problems with short-term memory is actually a sign of dementia. Keeping track of where you left your purse or wallet. Paying your bills. Sometimes you forget whether you've paid your bills. You pay your bills twice. You forget how to plan and, mundane things that you could do, with your eyes closed. All of a sudden, you're struggling to do that. You forget the recipe for a dish that you have been preparing for years. You forget appointments. You're meant to go somewhere, then you find yourself somewhere else. So all these are signs of dementia. And one thing about dementia, very common thing, is that these symptoms, they tend to be progressive. They don't creep on you. They're progressive. Signs of cognitive impairment, they start out slowly and they gradually get worse over time, leading to dementia. So as we progress in this training on mental health awareness in seniors, I will actually talk more about ways in which we can actually begin to look out for these signs, train ourselves to actually avoid these problems developing, like brain training, eating well, keeping fit, for instance. So I think this is one of my last slides. So there are a lot of myths and facts versus facts regarding mental health and aging. So the first one is that, mental illness is a normal part of aging, which could be true, okay? And which is not necessarily true, because there are people, I'm sure some of us here know people that are in their 90s, or knew people that that were in their 90s and they were sharp like a 40-year-old. But anyway, even if mental health is a normal part of aging, there are many conditions that are preventable and treatable. The other myth is that seniors don't benefit from therapy. Like, the minute these mental health issues materialize, that's it. Nothing can be done. But that's a myth, because their therapy and social support are very effective. There's a lot of therapy out there, and there's a lot of social support that seniors can be amenable to that can actually combat mental health issues in seniors. So what do we need to do? What we need to do is check for the warning signs. Check for the warning signs in your loved ones. Check for mood changes. Check for withdrawal symptoms, confusion, 1 minute they're angry, for no reason, that you don't know why, or you feel angry for no reason. If you constantly find yourself feeling frustrated, feeling angry for no reason, this is a time to pay a visit to your GP. Also, sleep and appetite changes, sudden weight loss, you're finding it difficult to sleep, or you're sleeping too much. That is a warning sign of a mental health problem. Also, all of a sudden, somebody starts neglecting their hygiene. They forget to have their bath, they forget to change, they're not looking after themselves, the way they dress. Sometimes you see an elderly relative, an elderly friend, they go out, you see them in the shops, and they're wearing 2 different pairs of shoes. This is the time to, approach, somebody who, approach a family member of the person, or even ask the person if you can take them to the doctor, or ask them when last did they go to the doctor, and help them book an appointment. Or if you find yourself, losing interest in looking after yourself, losing interest in the way you look, losing interest in, basic things that we need to do, to maintain our personal hygiene, it's a time to pay that visit to your GP. So what are the key takeaways, and how are we going to look ahead to the next couple of presentations on this topic? So what I've talked about today is that seniors are increasingly active in the workforce and family life. We're getting older, we're living younger, we're living longer, and seniors have a role to play in society, and one is, grandparenting, volunteering, bridging those intergenerational relationships, contributing to the growth of younger people. So it is important that seniors are sharp enough to be able to contribute to the workforce if they want to their family life. And the only way that could be achieved in a healthy manner without any pressure on the health system and the economy is looking after one's mental health. Also, aging brings both contributions and challenges. So especially in the healthcare and economic systems. So getting educated on mental health awareness, cannot be overemphasized. Mental health concerns such as depression, anxiety, dementia, loneliness, and substance use, they're prevalent and they need targeted support. And we're going to talk about that in the next two presentations. So looking ahead, something that we need to discuss and consider are how can communities, policies, and services better support aging population? And one of the ways in which the GIM Legal Centre is actually trying to support this initiative is this course for starters, as well as other activities to promote and support the aging population, such as promoting financial awareness, digital literacy, and so on and so forth. And also, what role can intergenerational collaboration play in fostering resilience and well-being? How can we foster better relationships between elderly people and the younger generation? One comment I want to make regarding seniors still being active in the workforce. There are sectors that, there's been anger and anger and hostility towards older people staying longer in the workforce because younger people feel that, they're not opening jobs, they're filling up jobs that younger people should be offered. And yes, there is an advantage in that and there's a disadvantage in that. But I feel that moving forward, policies have to be advocated in which the value of seniors should be promoted, and there should be certain jobs that could be reserved for older generations in terms of human resources, mentorship, and also leadership positions, to help, say, younger people settle in different in different sectors. For instance, I think that if policies are advocated and there's funding for that, the hostility and strife that's being created between the young and older generation, can be controlled in the workforce. Also, I think activities to actually promote interaction between seniors and younger people, should be fostered, because I think the younger generations have a lot to learn from seniors. But at the end of the day, seniors have to be in a good frame of mind to be able to provide this kind of support. So yeah, so that was my last slide. And thank you for listening, and I can welcome questions. Okay, that is part 2. So any questions? Any questions? So somebody wants to know more about, I'm just going to bring up the slide, the types of dementia. So yes, I know lots of people tend to confuse what Alzheimer's is compared to dementia. So as I mentioned before, dementia is the umbrella term for the loss of memory, cognitive dysfunction. Alzheimer's is actually a type of dementia. And also there are different types of Alzheimer's. So there could be vascular Alzheimer's, as well as Alzheimer's that has to do with cognitive dysfunction. But gradually, the individual that is suffering from vascular Alzheimer's, actually the body begins to forget how to perform certain processes. So that is the main difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. Any other questions? Someone wants to know whether there is a link between alcohol intake and depression. So the alcohol intake can be a trigger for depression, especially if one has a history of depression. So elderly people are actually advised to control their alcohol intake. I can't remember how many volumes they're allowed per week, but there is a link. But it tends to be in individuals who are susceptible to depression. I wanted to add that if anybody wants these slides, I can share them. All they need to do is to send me an email. I will put my email address in the chat, and I'm very happy to share these slides. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I'll thank you all for joining, and I will see you next Tuesday okay. I will see you next Tuesday where I will be talking about promoting mental wellness in seniors. So have a good rest of your good evening. Thank you.